Qui-Gon Jinn was the former Padawan of Jedi Master Dooku, and was renowned as one of the finest swordmasters and one of the most powerful Force wielders in the Jedi Order, with a deep connection to the living Force. However, he was something of a family black sheep within the Jedi Order. His strong reverence for the Force ahead of everything else often motivated him to go against the dictates of the Jedi Council, and occasionally against the Jedi Code itself. This maverick streak prevented him from being named to the Jedi Council, despite his renown within the Order and his close relationships with many of the body's members. In 32 BBY, Jinn was involved in the Naboo crisis, and was struck down by Sith apprentice Darth Maul after a heated duel during the final Battle of Theed. Transcending the material plane as a Force spirit, he returned to advise and aid his surviving friends and colleagues in their time of crisis, the Great Jedi Purge. Thousands of years after the fall of the old Sith Empire, and mere decades before the Battle of Yavin, Sora Bulq rose to prominence as one of the finest swordmasters in the Jedi Order. A noted innovator pushing the development of lightsaber combat, Bulq was even involved in the refinement of Vapad, a variation on the dangerous Form 7 lightsaber combat devised by Mace Windu. When the Clone Wars broke out in 22 BBY, Bulq was actually involved in the initial engagement on Geonosis and teamed up with the Jedi spy master Thom to capture Count Dooku, the ex-Jedi who had instigated the war. The mission was an utter failure, as both combatants were outclassed by Dooku's lightsaber skills and his new Sith powers. Thom was disabled, and Bulq was captured. Playing on Bulq's remorse at the loss of so many Jedi on Geonosis, and his secret fascination with the dark side of the Force, Dooku managed to turn Bulq to his side, conscripting him as one of his lieutenants, one of the ex-Jedi Dark Acolytes. Sora Bulq then rescued Thom and returned to the Jedi Temple as a hero. He attempted to use his newfound credibility to trigger a schism within the Jedi Order, but his scheme was uncovered by Mace Windu, and Bulq was exposed as a separatist agent. During the Clone Wars, Bulq served as one of Dooku's advisors and bodyguards, and was occasionally given high-level administration duties. Towards the end of the war, Sora Bulq was slain by Quinlan Vos during the Siege of Saleucami. Hello YouTube! This is Jin Sare, the Nerd Rage Ranter, and I'm here presenting my latest Versus video. I had just updated Qui-Gon Jinn's statistics for a different matchup, but due to technical difficulties on my end, I wasn't able to use the other combatant I had planned on. So, treat this video as your consolation prize. Just to warn you, I did cut a few corners. I'm simply reusing the Sora Bulq clips that I had assembled for Darth Malgus vs Sora Bulq, rather than creating a new set, so I will be including a set of links in the video that will allow you to skip those sections if you so choose. However, if you turned off the links, or if you're watching this video using the YouTube app on your Xbox, you're shit out of luck. With all of that out of the way, let us begin. Qui-Gon Jinn was a lightsaber prodigy at a very young age, regarded by his 400-year-old lightsaber instructor as his finest student. He was hailed as one of the most able swordsmen in the Jedi Order, with greats such as Anun Bandara crediting him as the superior fighter. Jinn's chosen discipline was the Ataru style, the fourth classical form of Jedi lightsaber combat, a fast-paced and aggressive fighting style with a heavy focus on speed and agility. Accordingly, Qui-Gon demonstrated very high levels of speed, agility, and acrobatic ability, and executed his sword moves swiftly. However, in a notable deviation from Ataru norms, Qui-Gon focused heavily on brute strength. This retooling of Ataru was more than likely Jinn's response to his flagging physical capabilities due to his advanced age, making the energetic and fast-paced acrobatics and swordplay of the style harder and harder for him to perform. Because he was so far past his physical prime, Qui-Gon Jinn's primary edge was his experience and his intuitive understanding of lightsaber combat. That being said, Jinn still demonstrated formidable physical ability, and by the standards of Ataru specialists, his stamina was excellent, as he was able to hold up a high-energy lightsaber duel with the much fitter Darth Maul for up to 15 minutes. His technique was highly sophisticated, the result of decades of refinement and experience. Jinn strongly favored chaining punches, kicks, and other physical strikes into his lightsaber sequences, very much in keeping with Ataru's focus on using the entire body as a weapon and implying skill in unarmed combat. He also had some skill at chaining force-based attacks into his lightsaber moves, though not without considerable difficulty, and he often needed to lower his guard while concentrating. More than once, he has simply put away his lightsaber before attempting such attacks. Qui-Gon also had a reasonable level of skill with blast deflection, compensating for one of Ataru's major shortcomings, though a skilled marksman can get past his guard. Qui-Gon Jinn's effectiveness against multiple opponents was something of a mixed bag, as shown in a sparring match with his then Padawan Xanatos and a former pupil, Femur. Qui-Gon was able to hold them off with ease when they attacked him individually, but as soon as they came on as a team, he was quickly disarmed. So in other words, Jinn was highly effective against disorganized gaggles of enemies, but was completely useless against properly organized opposition. Rather than rely on a tactical long view, Qui-Gon was a purely intuitive and improvisational fighter, strongly focused on the needs of the moment. While this mindset granted him a great deal of battlefield adaptability, more than once he has gotten in over his head due to a lack of tactical foresight. On the offensive, Jinn relied on a relentless series of fast-paced and powerful attacks. His favored offensive tactic was little more than a straightforward attempt to power through his opponent's defenses, just hammering him until he dropped. Under ideal circumstances, Jinn's favored defensive response was to avoid direct confrontation, outmaneuvering, shunting aside, or if need be, force shoving any attackers. Under less than ideal circumstances, he did what he could to eke out a defense, all the while working hard to fight back. When unable to do so, all he could really do was delay the inevitable. That being said, he was able to hold off Darth Maul's committed and highly focused Juya-style offense for quite a substantial period of time, indicating that he can defend himself against anything less than that caliber of attack. On the whole, Qui-Gon Jinn had a high level of skill and adaptability, but was hampered by his flagging physical condition and his lack of tactical foresight or creativity. That being said, he remained a force to be reckoned with. Sora Bulq was the product of decades of training and experience, and his reputation as a great swordmaster was well earned. Established on his StarWars.com databank entry as one of the greatest lightsaber instructors the Jedi Order has ever known, Bulq was also known as a great innovator, perfecting and refining the various combat techniques. Most have taken this to mean that he was a master of all known lightsaber forms, and though this isn't explicitly stated, I am inclined to agree. Due to his involvement in the creation of Vaapad, Mace Windu acknowledged that Sora Bulq's skill in the demanding regimen was only slightly below his own. However, Bulq's fall to the dark side prompted Windu to change his assessment, and as specified in a report featured in the Essential Guide to the Force, he stated his belief that Bulq had been mastered by Vaapad, rather than the converse. As described in the Essential Guide to the Force, Vaapad was a variation on Form 7 lightsaber combat, and was based on allowing oneself to enjoy the thrill of battle and accepting the fury of the opponent, creating a circuit of dark power that flowed through the Jedi without touching him, essentially allowing a Jedi to freely draw on the dark side to bolster his combat performance without running the risk of falling to it. However, Bulq's application completely failed to even remotely resemble this concept, and he instead catapulted himself into a violent, rage-fueled frenzy, wholeheartedly embracing the dark side. For all intents and purposes, Bulq's method was a regression back to Juya. Vaapad is the most prominent form in Sora Bulq's technique, the primary object of his fascination, and the main contributor to his fall to the dark side of the Force. As a Form 7 specialist, Bulq could be expected to be randomized and unpredictable in his moves, the usual attributes associated with Form 7 swordplay. While I don't think that Sora Bulq could bring on the sort of raw power that one would expect from someone like Darth Vader, his various appearances throughout the Star Wars Republic comic series demonstrated his clear preference for power attacks, which indicated that he possessed at least a respectable level of strength in his blows. Bulq was without a doubt extremely fast and agile, and was frequently depicted relying on acrobatics, indicating a talent in this area. Sora Bulq's most visible skill was his mastery of dual-blade fencing, though to his credit, he didn't allow this preference to become a specialization that detracted from his skills with the single blade, and he would set aside his secondary weapon if he thought it was necessary. Bulq's usage of a Shoto's short lightsaber as his offhand weapon indicated that his skill in this area was likely based off of Naiman dual blade training techniques. On the topic of Naiman, Bulq was also reasonably skilled at chaining force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences, and applied this tactic quite freely. However, his attacks consisted of nothing more than basic force pushes and shoves, a very rudimentary I'm gonna beat the crap out of you style of assault. Conversely, Bulq was also extremely weak against this style of attack, having twice been overcome by its application, a weakness consistent with Juya, but not with Vaapad. Clearly, Sora Bulq is not the great Vaapad master he imagines himself to be, or, like Mace Windu, he would be able to defend and counter against such an assault. As established in the Jedi Path, all Jedi lightsaber instructors are hardened warriors with hundreds of combat kills to their name, and the scars to prove it. By this logic, Sora Bulq, as one of the Jedi Order's greatest lightsaber instructors, would be a ridiculously experienced fighter. Given the era in which he operated, with Jedi being more likely to engage criminals or thugs over anyone else, skill at blast deflection and effectiveness against multiple opponents is practically a given. And given how his skill level compares to most of his contemporaries, there is no doubt that the vast majority of knights in the Jedi Order are completely outclassed by him, and the idea of him taking on and defeating multiple Jedi is not at all far-fetched. Bulq has a reasonably keen tactical mind, using misdirection and deception to his advantage several times. An excellent example was his assassination of Jedi Master Oppo Rancisis. Bulq relied on a number of Anzati assassins to grab Rancis's attention while he closed in, and once Rancisis dispatched the Anzati, Bulq made his move, backstabbing the hapless Jedi Master. Bulq summarized this neatly with, "Noise is a distraction, as this fight was a distraction, to cover for me." However, while this was an excellent demonstration of tactical misdirection, such strategy was not Bulq's instinct. In all of his duels, Bulq is depicted as simply attempting to power through his opponent's defenses, doing so with reckless abandon. Towards the end of his life, Bulq's devotion to the dark side caused him to start devolving into what Matt Chapman termed a vessel of irrational, unchecked rage. His final engagement with Jedi Master Thuln was a clear demonstration of this. Though he outclassed his opponent almost completely, Bulq deliberately drew out the contest with the expressed intent of making Thuln suffer. So not only was Bulq a vessel of unchecked rage, but he was also governed by sadistic impulses. Whenever fighting on the offensive, Bulq demonstrated many of the attributes of typical Form 7 specialists: a spastic, randomized attack pattern, and unrelenting aggression. However, Bulq's defense was relatively weak, which is surprising given that Sarisu and Makashi are no doubt included in his repertoire of skills, but this is consistent with Form 7, where everything is sacrificed to bolster offense. And that last phrase sums it all up. Everything is sacrificed to bolster offense. In a nutshell, Sora Bulq was a relentlessly aggressive, destructive animal driven by rage and sadism. In other words, a fairly typical Darksider. Both are offensive power duelists, but aside from a few common skills, that is where the similarities end. Right from the start, Sora Bulq is clearly the better duelist in terms of raw skill. He has a much broader and more advanced skill set, and though his application of Vaapad may not match with the principles or intentions of the art, his demonstrated combat effectiveness and accomplishments prove that he isn't lacking for technical skill. He may not have mastered himself, but he has mastered the forms. While Qui-Gon Jinn has retooled his application of Ataru to focus more on strength and long-term sustainability, his method is still very direct and straightforward, and as a result is nothing that Sora Bulq wouldn't have seen before. That being said, there is something to be said for keeping things simple, taking the direct approach over and ahead of elaborate and grandiose spectacle. There is a reason for why Qui-Gon Jinn is held in such esteem as a swordmaster, and his demonstrated skill proves that he isn't lacking for technical skill either. Jinn may not have mastered all the forms, but he knows his one form inside and out, and even if he's not Bulq's equal, he is very much in Bulq's league in terms of skill. And not only has Qui-Gon completely mastered his chosen fighting style, he has also mastered himself. While he may not be able to defeat Sora Bulq outright, Qui-Gon Jinn could definitely hold off Bulq thanks to his superior strategic insight. While Bulq is easily comparable to Qui-Gon's killer, Darth Maul, in terms of martial prowess, one of the reasons for Maul's success against Jinn was that, despite his arrogance, he was a very intelligent and calculating duelist. Sora Bulq isn't. Bulq runs his show like a rabid dog, and even under the best of circumstances, he is incredibly reckless. However, while Qui-Gon Jinn is almost certainly a more intelligent fighter, he wouldn't be able to best his adversary through tactical ingenuity due to his own limitations. Qui-Gon Jinn is blessed with great tactical insight, an intuitive understanding of lightsaber combat, and great skill as an improvisational fighter, but he has no tactical foresight or planning ability, and for all intents and purposes, he simply blunders through situations, making things up as he goes. And then add this to a mile-wide recklessness streak of his own, and do the math. I absolutely love Qui-Gon Jinn as a lightsaber duelist. Next to Darth Vader, he is my favorite. But his complete lack of any sort of planning ability is a serious detriment. Against a more strategically minded foe, such as Darth Maul or Dooku, even if Jinn takes the offensive initiative, he can never take the strategic initiative. He can never take control of the fight. If he's on the offensive, he's being lured. If he's on the defensive, he's being herded. All he can do is react, and his only chance of winning is through skill. Now, this doesn't mean that Qui-Gon has no tactical insight at all. He knows how to roll with the punches, he knows how to think on his feet and improvise, and he knows when the enemy is applying any tactics of his own. He's not blind, and he did realize that Darth Maul was in complete control of the Duel of Fates, leading the battle to a location of his own choice, though he wasn't able to come up with any way of countering this. Despite his lack of foresight or planning, Jinn does use and apply tactics of his own. I've already explained the defensive tactics he applied during his sparring match with Xanatos and Femur, and this puts him miles ahead of Sora Bulq, whose typical response is to just blunder into a situation and kill everybody. Case in point, the incident on Rule. The plan, almost certainly Dooku's, was for Bulq, still operating as Dooku's plant within the Jedi Order, to call for a meeting between various anti-war Jedi dissidents and Jedi Council Master Mace Windu, kill a few of the dissidents, pin their deaths on Windu, and kickstart a schism within the Jedi Order, convincing all the other anti-war Jedi that the Council was out for blood and driving them into Dooku's arms. However, Windu sniffed out the scheme and confronted Bulq. As the original plan hinged on Windu's ignorance, he had to go. But rather than simply killing Windu, claiming it was self-defense and calling it a day, he decides to kill everyone and pin the massacre on a dead Mace Windu, replacing the misdirection and subtlety of the original plan with pointless butchery. And this is before Bulq's corruption and depravity due to his immersion in the dark side really started setting in, so it's all downhill from here. Sora Bulq is driven by sadism and bloodlust, and when he's fighting, he's not thinking. Qui-Gon Jinn, while not a planner, is a much more cerebral fighter, and while he wouldn't have any sort of overall strategy, he would be able to come up with some sort of in-the-moment tactic to better enable him to hold off Bulq's blind offense. However, while we can be assured that Qui-Gon has sufficient martial skill and tactical ingenuity to fend off Sora Bulq, he isn't smart enough to defeat Sora purely through strategic brilliance, due to his own limitations. What results is a stalemate, with Sora Bulq blindly throwing himself at Qui-Gon Jinn, while Jinn evades and deflects, but is left incapable of effectively fighting back. Due to the labor intensity and physical demands of their fighting styles, a stalemate like this essentially turns their contest into an endurance run. While physical endurance and stamina are influenced by martial arts training and style, they are ultimately determined by a completely different set of factors, and accordingly wouldn't have any bearing on this conclusion. As a pure martial arts contest between these two would result in a stalemate, I declare Qui-Gon Jinn and Sora Bulq equal as martial artists and lightsaber duelists. Qui-Gon Jinn was a human male in his late 50s. He retained a good level of speed and agility, but he was past his prime. It was the degradation of these attributes that forced him to adjust his lightsaber technique to compensate. However, as I mentioned, he did retain a good level of physical ability despite his age, and was able to keep pace with the much younger and fitter Darth Maul for much of their duel, only starting to tire towards the end. Sora Bulq was an approximately middle-aged Weequay male. Described in the Essential Guide to Alien Species, Weequay were known for their incredible resistance to injury, particularly blunt trauma and burns. As a Weequay, Bulq would have had a dense skeletal frame and skin like tough hide. Weequay skin was capable of withstanding average knife attacks and even blaster bolts, though vibroblades and lightsabers can cut through it like anything else. In addition to his durable physiology, Bulq, as a master lightsaber duelist, would have been a trained and highly disciplined martial artist. In terms of demonstrated physical capabilities, Bulq was something of a jack of all trades, being reasonably strong and reasonably agile. On the whole, Sora Bulq was quite an effective package, combining physical discipline with natural toughness. Even if Qui-Gon Jinn were still in his physical prime, Sora Bulq would still get the edge, due to his superior Weequay physiology. Moving on. Qui-Gon Jinn was one of the greatest masters of the Force in his day, with a strong connection to the living Force, which, among other things, was the source from which all practical Force abilities were derived. Qui-Gon was reasonably skilled with basic physical augmentation, boosting his speed, agility, and reflexes to superhuman levels, enabling him to perform blast deflection and superhuman acrobatics, as well as the various other feats for which the Jedi were famed. However, Jinn never took this ability to its nth degree in the same manner as other great Ataru masters, such as Yoda or Shakti, so much of his combat effectiveness was rooted in his native physical capabilities. Qui-Gon's skill with telekinesis was considerable, but his need to concentrate and gather his energies hampered his ability to apply it in combat. While he had used telekinetic attacks while sparring or when engaging regular soldiers and battle droids, he had never been depicted using such attacks in a serious lightsaber duel against opposing Force wielders. Jinn had a great deal of aptitude with Force-based telepathy and suggestion, and in fact has been criticized for his over-reliance on this skill. He'd been able to compel weak-willed individuals to do his bidding, and has even been able to influence their memories or induce relaxation and sleep. However, strong-willed individuals or species with a natural resistance to telepathy were beyond his ability to influence. He'd also been able to telepathically communicate with willing subjects, sending messages or probing for information. It's never been established whether or not he can forcibly probe the minds of unwilling individuals, though I'm inclined to think that he can't. Arguably, Qui-Gon's most notable power was his ability to transcend the material plane as a Force spirit, surviving his physical death. Much of Qui-Gon Jinn's reputation stems from his academic knowledge and understanding, rather than skill as a combative Force wielder. That being said, he is capable. Sora Bulq has demonstrated a lot of skill at augmenting his physicality through the Force, allowing him to move with superhuman speed and agility. However, this ability was common to all Force wielders trained by the Jedi or the Sith. Bulq also demonstrated a level of competence with telekinesis, though his combative applications of this power were fairly rudimentary. He relied almost exclusively on vicious Force pushes and shoves to stagger and thrash his opponents about. While he did on one occasion use telekinesis to guide a thrown lightsaber, it wasn't as an attack, and his combative attacks have never demonstrated any major levels of sophistication. Bulq's telekinetic assaults instead seem to adhere to the simple, straightforward policy of, "I'm gonna beat the living crap out of you." Throughout Sora Bulq's various appearances, we're actually provided with more information on what the character can't do. Despite being a committed and fanatical Darksider, Bulq's application of its power seems to be limited to drawing on his rage to boost his ability to augment his physicality, allowing him to fall into overpowering animalistic frenzies. He'd never applied any sophisticated Darkside Force abilities such as lightning, nor had it really colored any of his other powers like telekinesis. For example, he'd never been witnessed using telekinesis to choke someone to death, despite this method being a staple of Darksiders. He also seems to be incapable of wielding the Force in a defensive manner, and was accordingly extremely vulnerable against Force-based attacks, a major weakness that has proven to be his undoing several times. While Bulq had demonstrated some skill at cloaking his Force signature and moving about undetected by Jedi, he was at the very least apprehensive about his ability to wield this power, shown by his reliance on Anzati assassins to distract Jedi Master Oppo Rancisis while he closed in and stabbed him in the back, a rare demonstration of tactical misdirection and deception from the otherwise brutish Dark Jedi. On the whole, while Sora Bulq is clearly a powerful Force wielder, he's very much a blunt instrument devoid of sophistication or subtlety. It's never really been established whether Qui-Gon Jinn's relatively lackluster application of Force-based physical augmentation stemmed from true inability or a simple unwillingness. But the end result is the same, as a lack of confidence is ultimately just as bad as a true lack of ability. So obviously Sora Bulq gets the edge when it comes to this skill, and it bolsters his fighting style. Bulq also gets the edge in terms of telekinetic ability, applying force pushes and shoves a lot more freely and fluidly than Jinn, who experiences obvious difficulty with combative applications of the Force, and refrains for good reason. However, I'm not sure how much of an advantage Bulq's greater skill with this type of attack would be, as it really depends on how vulnerable Jinn is against telekinesis. Telepathy and mind tricks wouldn't come into play in a battle between two Force wielders trained to resist such influence, unless one or both of the combatants either had a pronounced weakness against such talents, or an exceptional level of skill with them, neither of which is the case here. Bulq's ability to conceal his Force signature may come into play, as Qui-Gon evidently lacks such talents, but this is unlikely, due to Bulq's clear apprehension regarding his ability with it, and his strong preference for straightforward offensives. Sora Bulq is a spree killer, not an ambush predator, and he gets the edge as a Force wielder. Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber followed the custom of his day, and featured an elaborate internal design. The scalloped hand grip was composed of numerous small power cells, which allowed Jinn more control over the lightsaber's electrical charge levels. Microscopic circuitry governed the nature of the blade. The activator was a simple red button on the upper third of the hilt, while the charging port was along the bottom third near the pommel. Jinn utilized a single green-hued Adagan crystal as the focusing lens. Sora Bulq wielded a standard lightsaber of fairly nondescript make, paired up with a Shoto short lightsaber of similar design. In other words, the traditional armament of a Jarkai specialist. The lightsaber wouldn't possess any major technical or design advantages beyond Bulq's familiarity with his own handiwork. The Shoto, on the other hand, has a number of uses. The shorter blade allowed for better control and a greater range of motion, and like the daggers wielded by Renaissance-era fencers, it was used for close quarters defense, while the full-length blade was used for offense. Both lightsabers originally used blue-hued Ilum crystals, which produced reasonably strong but very stable blades with good maneuverability. However, after his defection to the CIS during the war became widely known, he openly displayed his new affiliation by replacing the Ilum crystals with Sith-style synthetic ones. The red-hued synth crystals produced more powerful blades, but at the cost of maneuverability and control. Dual blades provide more options in combat, and Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber, while a fine piece of craftsmanship, doesn't include any design or functional features that offset this advantage. In addition, the ability to choose between a standard lightsaber and a Shoto for use as a primary weapon provides more options still. Sora Bulq gets the edge in armament and equipment. As I detailed earlier, Qui-Gon Jinn's skill as a swordsman and his clever use of in-the-moment tactics would enable him to hold off Sora Bulq's blind offense, but he wouldn't be able to fight back in any appreciable way. Bulq's raw skill is greater, and this prevents Qui-Gon from taking him down with deft swordplay, and Jinn's own limitations, namely his complete lack of any sort of tactical foresight or strategic planning ability, prevents him from outwitting Bulq, and due to the physical demands of their fighting styles, this stalemate turns into an endurance run. And in that sort of contest, Sora Bulq has a colossal edge. Weequay are a much hardier race than humans, meaning that even if Jinn were in his physical prime, Bulq would still be able to outmatch or outlast him. This advantage is further compounded by Bulq's greater aptitude with practical and combative force abilities. His superior skill with force-based physical augmentation bolsters his physical advantage and his fighting style, and his much greater skill with telekinetic attacks provides him with even more offensive avenues that Qui-Gon has only limited access to due to his own handicaps. While Sora Bulq's armament is clearly superior, I don't know how much of an advantage this will be. Qui-Gon Jinn is known to have experience against dual-blade fencers, and given the ease with which he adjusted to combating Darth Maul's saber staff, he clearly isn't fazed by this style of armament. In fact, it is entirely possible that Qui-Gon has studied dual-blade fencing, as the Itaru style is known to provide training in this style of combat. But all of that is beside the point. Qui-Gon Jinn has the skill and the tactical insight to hold Sora Bulq off in the short term. But the longer he fights, the harder it's going to get for him. Bulq's superior physiology enables him to simply outlast his adversary, further bolstered by his greater aptitude with force-based physical augmentation. And even if Jinn doesn't possess a vulnerability against telekinesis, defending against it still calls for considerable effort, meaning that Bulq's frequent use of such attacks would further contribute to the drain on Qui-Gon's stamina, provided they didn't disable him outright. Qui-Gon Jinn has the skill and the experience to engage Sora Bulq, but he does not possess the combative longevity or the sheer power that would be necessary in such a contest, so his mounting fatigue would cause him to eventually break under the strain. I declare Sora Bulq the winner. Alright, ladies, gentlemen, and freaky deaky alien monsters, Remember, this is just my opinion, so don't get too bent out of shape because Qui-Gon Jinn is your favorite Jedi. Feel free to chime in, short comments below, essays sent to my message board, or emailed to me. But above all, keep things civil.